What's up guys, how's it going? So mopping is a huge pain in the ass. Nobody ever wants to do it. And I don't know if it's because it's uncomfortable or if it's just unglamorous and people are embarrassed to be seen with a mop in their hand. But I want to go ahead and talk about mopping a little bit in today's video and just go over a couple of things that are going to make it a little bit easier for you to mop. And if you can make it easier to mop in your company, it's going to be a lot easier for your employees to actually follow through and do a really good job. So when you are maintaining facilities and on a janitorial company, mopping is something that you're going to have to do a lot of. So hopefully you guys get something out of these tips and tricks that I'm going to share with you today. So I have two mop buckets right here and they basically look the same. They're both yellow. They both have ringers on here that are removable. But there are some major differences that we need to discuss. So first of all, with the size difference, this one's bigger, this one's smaller, obviously. So this can hold a lot more water. This can hold about 2 more gallons of water than that. And what that's going to do is it's going to make your water stay cleaner for a longer period of time. Because if you're mopping a greasy restaurant floor, for example, your water is going to become saturated with grease, and then you're going to be spreading that grease around the floor a lot sooner. Now, there's an easy fix, obviously. It's dumping the mop bucket out and then filling it back up with clean water. But if you have employees, employees are kind of lazy people, and they're not going to stop halfway through the middle of a job and go fill up a mop bucket to get clean water. They're just going to go ahead and continue mopping with that dirty water until it's basically black. So to avoid that problem, go ahead and get the biggest mop bucket you can find. This is the Rubbermaid Wave Break. I like this because it's got, on the inside of the bucket, you can't see it right now because it's full, but on the inside of the bucket, this plastic is molded inside and it's got a little bit of a ridge right here, and that prevents waves. So when you're moving the bucket back and forth, the waves are a lot smaller. Something like this is just an open container. So if you move that back and forth, you're gonna get big heavy waves that are gonna go right over the top. The next thing I want to talk about is maintenance. These casters get stuck. See that? This doesn't turn at all. I'm moving the whole bucket and that caster is locked in there. And also it doesn't spin this way. I'm putting a lot of weight on that wheel and it won't even turn at all. That's gonna make your mop bucket hard to move around. And if it's hard to move around, people aren't gonna wanna use it. It's gonna be a pain. And especially if it doesn't have that wave break option and the casters are stuck, you're gonna spill water all over the place when you go over bumps or carpet or whatever. So you're just asking for trouble if your mop bucket is not well maintained. If you have casters like this that are locked up, just throw the whole mop bucket out and get a new one. And if it's too expensive, then just remove the caster and order some new ones and put new wheels on there. But don't use a mop bucket that has broken casters, because people are going to spill and you're going to get big messes and your employees aren't even going to want to use the mop bucket when they have to. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is going to be the mop handle. The mop handle should be about this tall. So it goes right to where my eyes are. It should be between my eyes and my nose. That's the proper height. If your mop handle's too short, well then you got to hunch over when you're mopping and it's going to put a lot of pressure on your lower back. And if you have staff that you need to mop a large area or something that's really dirty, they're not going to want to hunch over with their backs hurting. It's going to make the experience worse in their mind. They're not even going to know what's wrong about it. Because people don't know anything about mops, right? So they think that all mops are the same, and they're not going to notice that the mop handle's too short, so they're leaning over. They're just going to think, well, mopping sucks because I have to lean over and it hurts my back and I don't want to do it. So they're going to neglect that task. So you want to make it as comfortable as possible. Get a mop handle that is the right height. While I'm talking about mop handles, they're not all made out of the same material. This mop handle is a very strong, thick wood, and so the mop handle will not bend or flex. It's very sturdy and strong. Now, that is important because the mop head itself can become very heavy depending on the size of mop head. I'll go into another video probably all about different mop heads, but there are different sizes and different materials, and a mop head this size, it can weigh about 5 pounds. And so if you have it on a very flimsy mop handle, that handle's gonna bend and flex and break. I bought some from Home Depot and it seems like they're gonna break as I'm using it, and it makes the mopping harder because you can't get pressure when you're pushing onto the ground to get sticky stains off, because the mop handle will just bend and flex, and it just makes mopping a lot harder. So make sure to get one that's really steady and stable and hard. Now, the mop head holder is going to be different on every mop. There are many different styles, and this is one style that you can use. I don't particularly like this one, but this has been provided to us by the laundry company that gives us the mop heads. And so this is just the style that they use for whatever reason. But basically, you push this little thing out and it will bend that way and then over. You see how that hook's there? You just move that hook up and around and then it will open the clamp and then you can place the mop head in there. The problem with this style is that little thing will become, as you're using the mop, this will pull out and then the entire clamp will just open in the middle of you mopping. So that's what happens when these wear out. And if you have a dirty mop head that you've been using in toilet, like near toilets and stuff like that, nobody's gonna wanna touch this with their bare hands to reattach the mop. So you want one that will hold the mop head very securely. So maybe I'll try and get a couple of pictures and show you some good mop handles with good holders on them so that you can get a better idea of the different options and stuff out there. Now, there are some cheap mop handles that are about $12, and they have a metal clamp on there to hold the mop head. Never buy these. That little metal piece on the bottom is going to sit and scratch the ground, and that metal is not going to be strong enough to hold the mop head, especially when it gets really heavy, when it's saturated with water. So you never ever want to use these. They're just a cheap, crappy thing to buy. And if you don't know anything about mopping, you're gonna find yourself with one of these and nobody's gonna ever want to do the mopping because it makes the experience so horrible. My personal favorite mop handles have this clamp that are like jaws that when you twist, they open and close, and that will hold the mop really tight onto the handle, and it won't scratch the ground underneath it because there's no metal pieces or plastic pieces underneath the mop head, because it's held completely from the top of the mop head. It's very easy to release and put new mop heads on there, and they never seem to slip off or fall. So this is the one that I really like to use as much as possible. Now, let's get into the use of mop buckets. Oftentimes when I come in, I see that someone needed to pick up a small little stain off the ground. Maybe someone spilled a beer or a little cup of water, so they didn't need to do a whole lot of mopping, just a little bit. So they think that it's okay to just put a little bit of water into the bucket. So they might only fill it up to like right here, you know, very low water. But the problem is when you dunk your mop head into that, most of the mop head's not going to be submerged, and so it's not going to be wet enough to effectively pick up the spill. And then what will happen is the mop water will become too saturated too quickly, and so you're just going to be spreading around that grease. But the other thing is the mop head will become too saturated and it will ruin the mop head. So you always want to have a lot of water in here. That's why these mop buckets have these little fill lines. You want to fill right up to that top fill line so that you have the cleanest and soapiest water possible. That way, if you are picking up a little beer spill, you're going to be able to submerge that entire mop head into the water repeatedly and free up all of that beer, grime, and gunk and get it into the water. When the mop head is fully submerged like this, that beer and grime and grease is going to be mixing with the water. So then when you pull it up like this and you put it in your strainer, you're going to be pushing out all the dirty water and you're going to be just left with clean water. And you can do that repeatedly until your mop head is really clean. Then you're going to get the best experience possible. But you can't do that if you don't fill the mop bucket up all the way to that top fill line every single time. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is going to be storage. I see a lot of people use their dirty mops and they just throw them in the bottom of the mop bucket like that. Well, it's not going to dry out completely. It's going to start to stink. It's going to get really sticky and gross, and it's going to ruin that mop head a lot faster. I also see people store their mop heads up like this, thinking that, well, it's in the strainer, so all that water is going to leak out. But it's still too compressed, and it's not going to drain thoroughly. So you don't want to store your wet mop heads like this. If you don't have a place to hang the mop head up, what you can do is you just hang it off the side like that, and that way it'll fully dry out before the next use. Now, ideally, you'd want a mop sink where you can just prop the mop up like this, and then lean it against the wall, and that way it will continue to dry overnight and it'll be really dry by the next use. But whatever you do, don't just fill the mop bucket up to here where it's not even full at all, then mop up a tiny little spill and then just set the mop head right in that little tiny pool of water, because then you're just going to ruin the mop head. So avoid that at all costs. Anyway guys, hopefully that's helpful for you. Hopefully that helps your staff mop more effectively. So if you want to do what you want, when you want, how you want, for who you want, how much you want, subscribe to my channel. We'll see you guys next time.